Welcome to the 2016 KmikeyM annual review. We've never done this before, but it seemed like a nice way as we sort of end the year. We're going to do a little bit of looking back, and then as well as use this as a time to frame out essentially how we're going to measure success in the next year. Because it's documentation of the project itself has never been a big part of the project, because that then gets in the way of all the other things that I do as KmikeyM. I guess that was the overview. So real quick, there's going to be 30 slides. You'll be able to see the number there, so you'll know how far along we are. I always appreciate that, so I thought I'd point that out. We'll hit some quarterly highlights. I'll give you a couple numbers, emotional highlights and lowlights, and then we'll look ahead at a couple early projects and then do a Q&A. So pretty straightforward. Has everyone signed the release forms? Has anyone not signed 2 different forms? All right. You only did one?
You did both. I did both.
Oh, okay. Robbie says he did both. So, all right. Let's get started. This is a collection of what I was mostly thinking about over the year. I went through every email that I sent, my Evernote where I log everything, all of my social media accounts from the start of the year until just a couple days ago. And this is what I care about. And then I kind of just highlighted some of the more financial terms because they kept coming up over and over. I guess I didn't quite get all of them. I should have highlighted Ethereum. But yeah, so this is... This was interesting. I don't think it's that useful necessarily for all of you, but it was helpful and interesting for me. And then as I was done, I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot of weird random stuff. So I'm going to run you through the year really quickly. I basically have just noted a couple things that I was kind of working on, how I was spending most of my time in a given month. So in January, it was Chroma. I was working on Pot Dads, which is a online magazine about weed, legal weed, kind of with the idea that it's boring now and getting excited about how it's going to become boring, and that, you know, basically just like dads are going to be smoking weed and it won't be exciting or illicit anymore. Really interested in sort of just like how something that's so alternative just becomes really, really dry and dull, which is fun. I put in LA because I went there. So yeah, Distinct Daily, that's where this photo came from. They did a write-up and a photo shoot. That was really fun, a little bit of press, but you know, I don't think there was a share bump from that. And then there was also Snacker News, which, if you remember, was a shareholder question. My first acquisition of a media property, which is a kind of a hacker news, but specifically about snacks. So if you love snacks, you should go and participate in Snacker News. There's a lot of great material there. Not that different in February, although I went to LA again, and I met one of my shareholders, Victor Cho, is the CEO of Evite, and I just put that on there because it was one of those times of like first time meeting someone who's been a long time investor, and it was a really kind of engaging, fun experience to be like, oh, I got to go to the IAC headquarters in LA and hang out and talk business because I do this weird project. March, you know, again, Chroma, again. UFC, started hanging out with these people that are, you wouldn't normally think of would be in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, mixed martial arts. And they were like, hey, do you want to come and watch these incredibly horrible, brutal events where 2 people pummel each other into the ground? And I was like, sure, yeah. And so I went to like a couple of those with these people, and it was really interesting up until the point in which you see something really horrible, and then I didn't like it anymore. I put Jason Sturgill on here because he and I have been meeting kind of on and off again every couple months, and he's very similarly minded. He's a local designer in town, but we've never really done a project together until he did the Snack Lords logo, which is the Pret skull. I don't know if I should put a picture of it up, but he did a great logo for my snack media empire. Red Arrow is a reality TV company that is shopping around an idea for a KmikeyM reality TV show. So that's fun. See if that goes anywhere. And then Noah Dunham is the writer of the project where I want to do some sort of narrative about Jason Bateman so I can kind of play him before he plays me, because he's going to be more famous as me than I am. And so I thought, well, I'll be less famous as you than you are, was kind of the idea there. And that was a shareholder vote that passed. But Noah's been really hard to get in touch with because he's had this other successful project. Again, the UFC stuff shifted a little bit into wrestling, professional wrestling. I have a good friend, big shareholder, Steve Schrader, that's a professional wrestling fan and has a unholy amount of knowledge about it. So it's really fun to basically just listen to him narrate a match. And if you follow me on Twitter, you probably got really annoyed during WrestleMania because I tweeted way too much. The goal was I was just trying to get retweeted by other wrestling fans. So I was trying to say really inflammatory things or, yeah. I lost some followers there. I started meditating. That's been interesting and hard. Amit Gupta, I don't know if you guys know him. He's a little bit of an online celebrity. He and I got coffee a couple times and kind of talked about projects about community, which is another thing that he's really focused on. And yeah, he had some really interesting ideas about ways in which KmikeyM model might be used in other places, which is something that I really want to explore. And then I finally got a car, which was a shareholder-approved decision from 2012 that I finally did. So it took a little while, but mission accomplished. May, it's not, I had probably the greatest thing I ever did was when I got my fingernails custom painted with the currencies of every country in order of GDP. So it's like United States down to, it was a really amazing project and I was very proud of it, so I put it on here. NXT, I went to a live wrestling event. Gorilla Happy Hour, something that we kind of dropped off the map, but we did a lot with my friend Alex, where we would basically just pay people $1 for every drink they would have with us at a happy hour in order to force people to show up. It's kind of a form of networking. And then in June is when Chroma went to New York. We started the Barclays Accelerator, the tech accelerator there. That was, before I left, I met with Aaron Draplin, another designer that I've done a project with that still hasn't seen the light of day. I probably should have put that up here. I had him design a wrapper for a cigar so I could make custom cigars. And I never got them printed, but I'm doing all this research about other projects. I was like, oh, I have those and I should still do that. Because it'd be amazing if I could just hand out cigars with a custom wrapper of my face on them right now. But I haven't done it yet. Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit faster. Chroma New York, FinTech, kind of all projects stopped in New York except for Chroma, because we were basically like 12 hours a day working nearly 7 days a week on that the entire time. It was awesome. It was fantastic and fun. My friend Andrea Chalupa is there, and we had a really deep talk about kind of how to take KmikeyM into the media world. She just sold a screenplay and does a lot of reporting as well. In August, a lot of similar stuff. Andel is a company, it was the first company I met that I felt like was sort of spiritually close to what we were doing at Chroma. It's this thing of like, if you have a business model that sort of can't help but do good in the world, that's a lot of what we were trying to do with small business loans with Chroma. And Andela was doing that by having developers that they've hired in Africa, and they come together in these kind of like startup-like environments, but then it's part of, it's not outsourcing, it's not like temporary work. They want them to be permanent parts of technology teams. And it's, I don't know, it's just kind of an amazing idea where if you can create social good inherent to the business model. And that was something that I got really excited about. September, and I visited my brother in North Carolina and went fishing. That was fun. September, honey futures. This probably will be a future project of mine. Someone pointed out that the price of honey keeps going up, but the worry about bees and the number of bees and things like that keeps going down. Honey is very shelf stable, so it seems like you could just stockpile a lot of honey. It's like liquid gold in your basement, and then you could securitize that and sell portions of it. I don't know. Get ready. I'm going to pitch you all on honey eventually. I'm not quite there yet. And then I got back into Snacker News, and we'll come back to that in a minute. In October, Marek and I went to see Andrew WK talk about the power of partying. He is a rock and roll star, but he did a lecture tour, and it was amazing and inspirational in this kind of like very positive sense, which is the perfect antidote to the debates, which were horrible and depressing. And then EggDrop is a company that went through the, worked with Chroma when we were doing the Oregon interstate offering. We were allowing companies to raise money locally by selling securities. We've moved away from that at Chroma, but I've become an advisor at EggDrop. We've met over and over, and that's been a really rewarding experience. I really enjoyed the time we were doing that and meeting all the small companies and sort of being like, what do you need? How do you operate? These kind of things. And being able to keep that relationship has been great. And then I put Thomas King down here because he and I have been working on an idea for a KmikeyM book. So kind of the idea is that similar to sort of the Lee Iacocca with William Novak, it would be Mike Merrill with Thomas King, where he does all the work and I get all the credit, which is a great deal for me. And then November, the election, that was a bummer. Proposal, that was fantastic. Started consulting. Oh yeah, you'll notice, and I didn't mention this, that Chroma is no longer on here. So I have, as the co-founder of the company, let myself go from my company, which was a really hard decision. And yeah, I think we'll get into it later because I bring it up again later. Let's see, and then, oh yeah, and then I did this really fun thing where I just basically, being back in Portland, being like, oh, I need to find out what I'm doing next, and I kind of tried to meet with like everybody I knew, and I was going to put a picture of my calendar up because it was really funny, just like over and over and over, and I wasn't late to a single meeting, which was great. And then December, which is now, there's this documentary, and then there are a number of holiday parties. I mean, it's day one, so it's kind of filler. And then co-ops, which we'll also get into later. Been really fascinated by co-ops. I can stand over here a little bit more. Okay, so that was boring. Sorry about that. Context, it's history. Okay, hopefully it wasn't. By the numbers. So this is the fun part of a shareholder presentation. There were 13 shareholder questions this year, which, other than 2014, is the most by far that I've done. 2014 was an anomaly. The light blue is, I don't know if you remember the Jackson Garrity questions when I loaned my decision-making engine of all of you to a 17-year-old, and he was able to ask some questions. I am due on a follow-up with him to kind of see how all that went back in 2014. So maybe check in with him 3 years later. Will be fun. The reason there were so many is they all happened at the end of the year, and I decided to try to have a shareholder vote up all the time. That was my goal, is to say, every 2 weeks a new shareholder question. And that worked up until I had to do the proposal, which was very hard to write because it was very real, and I wanted to sort of respect the relationship as well as this, respect the relationship with the shareholders. So both of those things. And I rewrote it a bunch of times, and then it was like, it was hard, but I did it. And yeah, you all said yes, and that was great. Share price has been, pretty steady for the past year, and that right around that $5 mark goes further back. This I just marked the first price at the beginning of the month as I look back through it. So there are some things that are like a little higher, a little lower throughout that time, but that's roughly where it's been. And then obviously December, I think it's around there, but it could be changing right this very moment. And then this is a project that I've been doing since 2010 of tracking all of my social media and web metrics. And that includes things like number of people on the mailing list, number of user accounts, and then all the various social media. So it's a little misleading in that sometimes throughout the years I've added a new account, and that isn't necessarily reflected in the previous year. But it's gone consistently up. The light blue is in 2012 is when I bought Twitter followers, which was really fun. And then you can see they kind of all disappeared by 2014. And then this past year I bought Instagram followers. And so I like playing with this idea that a lot of people put a lot of value on these metrics, like, oh, you have so many of these things. And in 2012, I was actually in the Nike Plus Accelerator, and I remember we had this meeting with like Nike PR, and this woman was like, "You have so many. Like, we should totally leverage your, Twitter. Your Twitter followers are amazing." Because I had some crazy high number, and then I was like, Mark and I just looked at each other like, "Oh, that's not real." Yeah. So, and there's actually tools now you can check. So if you ever see and you're suspicious, like if you look at my Instagram, I have like 10,000 followers, but only like 18 people will like a photo. And there's actually websites you can enter, and people will like determine how many true followers you have that are real people versus paid for bots or whatever. So, but yeah, that number keeps going up, which is great. And one of the things I'm working on is trying to define where those people convert both into getting people on the mailing list, getting them into user accounts, and then getting them to buy shares. So started using some of this startup thinking, building a marketing funnel, and all that for KmikeyM. So that's something to look forward to. All right, highlights. The 99% approval of the proposal was fantastic. So that's definitely a highlight. That's a picture of our family with our horrible monster dog. And yeah, so that was fantastic. The other emotional highlight was a little mixed. It was, I am no longer a Republican, which I think came just in time. Because wow, things are confusing right now. I don't know how a publicly traded person should react right now. And I've been thinking a lot about it and pretty quiet about it. But we'll talk a little bit more about some of the ways in which I've been thinking about it. Lowlights. Obviously, leaving Chrome was really hard. I think don't need to go into a lot of detail about that, but it's generally like very excited about the future of what's going to happen with Chroma. Don't think that I necessarily need to be a draw on the company as far as a paycheck right now, and so that's kind of the reason for that. But still hard. Founded this thing, and then it's like, oh, there it goes. Yeah. Still involved. The mail still comes to my house. I think I still have to talk to Marcus all the time, so it's fine. Oh, and then, yeah, the other kind of, during that whole Chroma phase, some of you might remember there was a shareholder proposal where I could sell shares and use that money to support myself for a while. It's been ups and downs through the course of the company, and I have a significant amount of personal debt right now that I haven't had before in my life. I have no college debt, which is great. I didn't get a scholarship, I just didn't go to college. So that's a life hack. But yeah, so that's something that I really need to work on, kind of going forward. It limits my ability to do things because there are all these payments that are due, and it means that I can't hire someone to write about snacks or some of the other kind of fun and silly things I might do otherwise. Okay, so now let's look ahead to 2017. These are some things that I've been kind of like thinking about all year and sort of started to write down and display. Safety, fun, profit. I used to always say safety, profit, fun. Like safety first, profit second, then have fun. And what I realized is you really have to switch that order. You can't, it's a lot easier to make money when you're having fun and you're more relaxed and you're doing it. And so I'm trying to switch that around. So that's an idea that I'm trying to embody. Minimum viable process is a play on minimal viable product, which is kind of another startup term. But it's the idea, and I love process. I've used every to-do app, every mail client, every organizational tool. I love graph paper, all of it. And I will organize things to death and then not do them. And so minimal viable process is something really Marcus taught me where just reduce it down to the amount that is needed to get the job done and don't do any more. And so I'm happy to explore that stuff and play with it, but trying to get my own process down to what do I actually need to implement. Small Pieces Loosely Joined, I think it's also a book title, but thinking about my own projects as this kind of network of there's these individual, the snack media empire, and then there's a book, and then maybe there's a movie happening and these different things, and trying to figure out the ways that they interconnect and work together. Sequential, not parallel, is something I really struggle with. So I like to do everything all at the same time, line up all the projects and just move them all a tiny bit incrementally forward, which looks like nothing happened, even though I was busy the entire time. And so thinking through that, it's really like do a project, then do the next project, then do the next project, and get a little bit faster. And that's the kind of lean agile development thing of like get faster at releasing things, even if they're not done, see if there's some kind of interest in it, and then go back and put more time if people like it. Choose more, which is really just an awkward way of saying be picky. I don't choose very much. I think of an idea and I'm like, I'm going to do that. That's the thing that I'm going to do. And then again, many parallel projects. And so trying to be really specific about this is the thing I'm going to try to do, and I'm going to say no to these other things. And share more, which this is definitely a part of, but just process and ongoing. there was a shareholder vote about the Apple Watch, and in that discussion of that vote, it was really interesting. I just assumed that everybody wanted numerical data about my life because I feel like that's what I would want on the flip side. But everyone's like, no, we just want like a narrative. We just want to know what's going on, as if you're a human, not a publicly traded person. And I was like, okay, fair enough. So yeah, trying to get better at sharing. So from that, I kind of came up with these as my focuses for 2017, which is to establish steady income, which will help in reducing debt, produce engaging content, which is kind of a constant in my life, increase collaboration, and by that I mean both, I'm pretty good at pulling people onto a project, but I want to do projects where it's a little bit more two equal people or organizations meeting, kind of if you think of the fancy collaborations of like, some kind of weird edgy brand and, J. Crew will do something and they'll use the little X symbol. And so I want to do things like that. And I'm hoping to do some of that in the coming year. And then build community. One thing that right now, the world of KmikeyM is very hub and spoke. There's like me in the center and then there's all the people coming off of it. And the Slack channel is a good example of this. I want to get a little bit more of all the individual pieces talking to each other and being able to leverage one another if they're interested in doing that, not mandatory. And then, again, putting this up here, it's boring, but just as a form of accountability, my goal here is being like, set that yearly strategy, come in quarterly and provide kind of either a presentation or a video to the shareholders. Monthly is sort of this idea of like figure out what's working and either keep doing it or change course and send that out to everyone as an email or some kind of update on a blog. And then try to get something out every 2 weeks, which is something kind of, whether it's a vote or a major blog post or something, get something up and out frequently. Weekly sort of like set tasks, I use Trello for that, kind of review the full business and make sure what you're working on is the right things to be working on to achieve sort of up the chain. And then daily, I use an app called OmniFocus, and just kind of this, it's one person, so doing like a one-person stand-up is weird, but I added this bot to the Slack, KmikeyM Slack channel, where it asks me, like, what did you do yesterday? What are you doing today? And I fill it out, and then it displays it to everybody. So just trying to add some of that process into the whole thing, which then makes it easier to come back and review it and say what was successful and what wasn't. All right, projects. This is pretty short. This is kind of the main thing right now. I've been having some interest in people, small businesses, again, similar to what I was doing when I was working with Chrome and we were talking to small businesses about raising money. A lot of that was advice on things that were nothing about raising money, just like how do you do some of this stuff around process and marketing and digital tools and things like that. And I've found that I've kind of stumbled into knowing a fair amount about that through kind of Startupville and being able to apply it to a company that's not necessarily looking for hockey stick growth, but can still say like, hey, what are you doing this week? What is your website doing for you? How are you tracking that? And a lot of them don't because they're busy, but that's, I think, potential for somebody to come in and say, hey, I'll look at that for you and kind of check in with you on it. And so it's been really rewarding. I've been doing that with 2 different companies so far. And then the next major project, this is kind of probably a future upcoming vote, is I want to turn the snack media empire that I'm amassing, which is the isthisasandwich.com website, Snacker News, there's another one that I'm forgetting, Snack Lords, and maybe there's some others that other people run, and thinking like maybe instead of using those as another form of capitalism to explore some other ideas like a co-op. Marika and I joined the Alberta Grocery Co-op, and I started going to their board meetings, and at first I was like, this is a nightmare. Like, it's consensus-driven board, which is an amazing thing to watch, and then instead of a general manager of the store, it's collective management that's also consensus-driven, and I'm thinking, like, how does that store use this process when they have to be competitive in this, like, capitalist environment with Whole Foods and New Seasons just, blocks away in either direction? And so it's been really fun to think about that and think about like what does that collective ownership mean? Because I think as a member of a co-op, you think of it as membership but not ownership often. And so I remember there was always this, at Chroma, Marcus was the CEO and I was always something else. And I would be like, especially in the early days, I'd be like, hey, so what's like, what's the next thing that we're going to be doing? Like, I want to get kind of lined up, synced, to make sure I'm doing something that helps you. And he's like, you're co-founder, you own as much as I do. Just do whatever helps the company move forward. And I've thought about that many times as we've worked together. But then I was thinking, what if you did that at a co-op? Like, what if I just started a mailing list for the grocery co-op about new products that come in? I don't even know if they would like that. But it's interesting to be like, I'm an owner. Why can't I do that? But exploring the idea of the co-op and saying, can you do that online? Can you have an online co-op? I met with someone, and I was talking through him with this idea. It's like, have you heard of fraternal benefit organizations, like a Moose Lodge or an Elks Lodge? And he was like super fascinated by these kind of other weird forms of organizing labor and people together for a goal. So that'll probably be a vote, because I feel like the acquisition of Snacker News was shareholder approved, and there's probably capitalist expectations. But I feel like it would be more successful as a co-op. But I have some more explaining to do before I put that up for vote. Yeah, and this is what I was talking about with too many other projects. Like, there's so many things. The nutrition working group was a vote, and I owe this email, and I got feedback from people about where it's like, oh, this subset of the shareholders is going to help kind of guide and control my diet, and it's just like I haven't had time to sort of assemble all that back together and put something back out to them. I know I'm due for like fashion clothing system update. I don't technically right now, I'm allowed to wear non-Brooks Brothers. This is all Brooks Brothers, but I'm allowed to not do that. But I haven't determined what the new rules are. And then things like Honey Futures Pot Dads, the book, reality TV, some weirder ideas, outsourced fanfic erotica is something that I think would be interesting, if not successful. Yeah, so a lot of these, as I figure out, I kind of bolded the first two because that's what I'm working on, and then some of these will start to come up, but I'm going to try really hard to do that again, one after another instead of all at once. So yeah, that's it. Coming soon, 2017, which is exciting, and time for Q&A. That was long. I was like, was it? All right. Yeah, happy for just general feedback. If it's really mean and critical, you can email it to me, or you can just say it, and that's fine.
He's really good at receiving criticism.
I do love a good. I worked tech support was how I kind of got started working in technology. I'm really good at mean emails. So yeah, if you get a really mean email, I can help you write a response because it's fun. Okay, yeah, questions? Anybody? About anything?
Are you looking for work right now?
I am. Yep, I'm actively looking.
Are you going to get any of your projects done if you have a job?
I've always had a job. I've never only done KmikeyM because it does not provide enough income for me to live. So when this project started, I really thought it was a nights and weekend. Like, the idea was I have my job, but this project encompasses anything in my evening time and on my weekends. And then when Chroma came up for a vote and it was decided, then I was like, oh, well, now it's kind of all inclusive in a sense. So I would like the idea of, putting up shareholder votes about my job. I think that would be exciting. I think depending on where I go and what I do, that'll obviously factor in. Some people are going to be more open to that than others. But I look at the shareholders as like a pretty amazing resource. Like, when doing some consulting for one of the small businesses, I posted on the Slack thing like, hey, does anyone have any strong feelings about Dropbox versus Box, two competing cloud systems for shared files? And someone was like, oh yeah, this one's very corporate and hard to use, but yeah, and I was like, oh, that's great. So being able to use that as a resource is kind of amazing back into, if you hire me, you basically hire all of you, which is kind of amazing. Yeah, we'll see.
Are you hoping to keep up the pace of questions?
I am. I'd like to see. I don't want to force it. I feel like there was a couple times when I was doing it every 2 weeks where it would be like a pretty small question or kind of forced just to hit that requirement, which I think was a good practice. But I would like to keep up pretty rapid fire. It'd be nice if it was every 2 weeks, or roughly, if there were 26 next year instead of 13. Double the number.
Yeah, related to that. So first of all, congratulations on the proposal.
Thank you.
99%.
I have permission to ask.
Yes. Permission to
What
ask.
will she say?
That's a
So
whole other,
that's,
yeah.
that's sort of the, from the shareholder standpoint, that's the logical conclusion of the Romance Project. And the Romance Project gave us a lot of access to very important personal romantic decisions. Wondering if there's any concern, myself as a shareholder, concern about the access that we're going to have moving forward if the proposal is accepted. What kind of access will we have to those kinds of decisions moving forward, and will we lose control in that area of your life?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think I've been thinking about what does it look like if the publicly traded person is married to a non-publicly traded person, right? And it's sort of like taking that division of the romance project and privatizing it, right? And it's saying the realm of control is now sort of like happening over here outside of shareholder influence. However, I mean, the vote before the proposal was White House, Black House, where Marek and I were like stumped on a question together, right? And so that's something where we still were able to come to the shareholders and say, hey, that normally probably would have been a question we would have figured out. One of us would have had a strong opinion. The other would have said yes. We were kind of torn. We put that up for shareholder vote. So I think that's an interesting way that the shareholders will still be involved. And then I think there's also, for me, there's a big accountability aspect of using the shareholders. And I think that's something that Marika can take advantage of as far as like, oh, if she wants me to change a behavior, and maybe I'm like, yeah, I agree, but then I get busy and I don't do it, which, that happens. But if it becomes a shareholder-approved thing, then suddenly it's like, oh, well, now you have to, right? If it's like, oh, you need to, I don't know, what's a good example?
Stop talking with your mouth full.
Yeah, stop that. I have a really good technique, though, where as I'm eating, I can just shove all the food into my cheek.
He's great at
and
chipmunk
it's like you can't
So it
even
doesn't
tell.
seem like
Yeah,
he's
like
talking with his
audio-wise,
mouth
you can't tell. Visually, I agree that might be a problem. So yeah, something like that.
I
Yeah.
think it'll pass. I think
Yep.
that the shareholders are.
It's an efficiency
Going to
drain, though.
side with
But
me
yeah,
on
that could be an example of something where it's not necessarily that it's just that accountability side. And there could be, if that doesn't happen, then maybe some penalties. I don't know.
You put up, after we bought the house without permission
Mhm.
from your shareholders, you put up a vote condemning your decision to do that.
Well, right, yes.
Asking them to condemn you, rather.
Offering them the opportunity to condemn me.
And I
Yeah.
believe they did.
They did.
They did
They sure
condemn
did.
you.
They did not like that we bought a house together without asking.
Yes, they didn't. What I'm wondering is, are you going to feel bad if you're making big life decisions in our relationship? And those are things that you would like to have asked the shareholders about, but you don't feel like you can now because this idea of privatization of the romance?
Yes, I will feel bad.
Will you put up more condemnations?
I don't think so, because I think once it's approved that it becomes private, there's no reason to condemn it. It's sort of been allowed by them, even if I don't like it, or it doesn't feel right, or it's like, oh, this would be a great shareholder question. It doesn't need to be condemned anymore, because it's already been approved. Sort of like pre-approval, because it's now been privatized. So, yeah, but I think it will bother me, but I can get over that for you.
Thanks.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Have you thought about this transition period with the employment situation as an opportunity to hang a shingle as, KmikeyM Consulting, or, to leverage some of the social media marketing and product hacking and things like that the skills that you've developed, and maybe like the egg drop relationship,
Right.
Making an honest push maybe doesn't work, but it's an opportunity to maybe transition into.
Yep. And if you go to my LinkedIn, you will see K5M Consulting is on there now. I just recently added that. So yeah, I have Egg Drop I'm doing as kind of an advisor. There's not a financial repayment there, but there is another company that I've been working with that is paying, so that's great. And then there's a nonprofit that I've been consulting with about, that was with the file system. Someone had mentioned like, oh, I think we're gonna buy a server. And I was like, I don't even know what you're doing, but don't buy a server. Like, yeah, don't do that, yeah. So I went in and talked with them, and then that kind of guided them to the solution and did a little research on their behalf. And then, and I really enjoyed that stuff, and I think I add value there. So I think there's an opportunity. I think that's a more this concept of like anti-fragile. It's like a better way to make a living to have many small clients than one big one. Like I don't know, like many of the agencies in town that have like one big client, and if they lose that, they're done, right? And they have to fire like 40% of their people or more, whatever it is. So I like the idea that I could sort of be involved with a lot of different people providing, that service. But I know I have a lot of work to do as far as how I communicate that and put it forward. Like I tend to be maybe a little too consultative and be like, oh, like, what do you, versus like, oh, this is what you should do and this is the best solution, which I think honestly is what people want. They want to buy a shortcut. They want to outsource that thinking. They want to say like, I'm hiring you so that I don't have to think about this, right? I mean, that's why I have a accountant come tax time. It's like, I don't want to deal with it. She does it all. So I think I need to get a little bit better at that, but yeah.
I do think there's a lot of potential for consulting, but is that going to serve your budgetary needs the next year? And how do you feel about being a dual consulting household? Since I'm a consultant.
Again, I think it's a better way. I think it's a less fragile way to operate because you can lose a client or 3 if you have a whole bunch and not be wholly devastated. So I think in that sense, it's probably, I know it's a lot harder work and you're doing a lot more. You're probably like, oh, I wish I could just do my 8 hours and then be done and turn it off. But I mean, the thing that I learned at Chroma is it's really important to me that I care about the job that I do. And so I really don't want to go into something where I'm like, oh, now I'm just kind of like selling my time and I'm done, And again, I'm not saying I wouldn't do that. I might end up doing that, for the right company. But I'm excited about, for the first time, this idea of having multiple clients. And right now I'm kind of pursuing both at the same time. I mean, I'm putting in real job applications at the same time as I'm reaching out to small.
One of my questions, it might be a little bit of a zero-sum game, right? It's hard to
Right.
produce, to chase both those fish at the same time. So I just wondered where the focus was. It sounds like the focus is maybe on full-time employment with this kind of as a back burner. But if you had like K5M open office hours and you really pushed in this idea of come back and get a free hour with, and like make a push for that, maybe things would happen. But you might have to put the job search on.
Exactly.
Which, depending on the finances might be the
getting like 3 or 4 small clients and then getting a job and being like, peace, see ya. That sucks. So, yeah.
Say more about the movie projects. Do you have any control over whether they're going to happen or not? Is that something you're putting effort into? How does that?
Yeah, I'm not putting effort into that, but there is an agent that works with the writer of the Wired story that's putting effort into that, and so I get updates. I get infrequent updates about that. It's still in motion. I don't know how much to say publicly about it because I don't know what level of. It's never been like, oh, don't tell anyone this. But then I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that's like kind of in the works and they're building relationships and things like that. So it's one of those things where it's like, at this point, I'm in no way banking on it happening. It would be great if it did happen, And I kind of look at that as all the sort of like the big, like the reality TV thing. It's like, well, that would be amazing and fun. It probably won't happen, and if it does, it'll probably be really strange and awkward, But yeah, would that be fun to do? Absolutely. And that's one where, I mean, it could go in a lot of different ways.
Just wanted to go back to the employment part of it. If you were to get a job offer or multiple offers, how involved would the shareholders be in that? For instance, if you got a really good offer in another city, that would obviously impact your life.
Yeah, that's.
You might not want to take that job because
right.
you own a house here and everything. But
when I put up the vote of leaving Panic, I mean, that was a really, really hard decision to make. And the fact that it was like, I think that was also nearly unanimous. Going through that process and having basically my entire community say, yes, absolutely take this risk and go do it, made me feel a lot better. Like that was really empowering to be like, oh, this is the right decision, right? Like everyone thinks that I should take this risk, even if I might fail or whatever. So I hope to be able to do that. I don't know. It'll depend on the circumstances, and we'll see. I want KmikeyM decision-making engine to be a part of that process, one way or another. And maybe we go private with it, right? Maybe it's similar to when the romance project was running, and we just run it privately so it's not open to the public, and then it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm turning down this job because my shareholders voted no. I can just say, oh, I'm turning down this opportunity because it's not the right fit, right? Because maybe all that happens behind closed doors among the shareholders. So that might be a good way to do that. And still have all that code for the romance project. We could just spin that back up, cross out romance, job project, yeah. So, not a bad idea. Any other questions?
Do you ever intend to be more transparent about maybe not household finances, especially in lieu of the proposal and the privatization that you're talking about, but amount in the account for the stock, and if you were to start rolling up consulting projects, like being transparent about the inflows and outflows and stuff like that, or is that something that it's probably not going to be?
I think that should happen, and I think it probably should have already happened. Alex and I did radical fiscal transparency a couple of years ago, probably many years ago, because everything happened many years ago now that I'm old. But where we basically just like put up a spreadsheet of like, this is everything I spent, and and then people would be like, holy shit, you spend that much on coffee or whatever it was. I was like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Sorry, but that was a really that forces accountability. David Reese gave a talk at XOXO, and it's online now. You can watch it on YouTube, where he basically goes through how much money he made and what he was working on every year, since back to however long, and that's pretty amazing and inspiring. So yeah, I should be more transparent about finances, both personal and project-wise. Those accounts are separate. I keep that money separate, so it's not those things don't intermingle. But and on the personal side, I could just share percentages, maybe, or something like that. Like, oh, it's this much, kind of proportional. It doesn't have to be all exact numbers.
You're turning 40 next year.
Yeah, it'll be my fourth annual 40th party.
Your fourth annual 40th birthday.
So I got ahead of that. I started having a 40th themed birthday party, so then I can just stay at 40. So then when I'm like 45, I'll still be having 40th parties. Genetically blessed with the baby face, so I can pull that off for a while, I think.
Does turning 40 inspire you to make any headway on the diet and nutrition questions?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the reason for the nutrition working group. Actually, Aaron inspired that. He is on the W3C working group, which basically defines how the internet works. And it's this, again, kind of amazing collaborative way of working and protocol of defined of like how you make decisions and where things all, like this group comes together and does this, and then these people approve it and feedback and all this. And so I was like, well, I don't need to put the minutia of everything that I eat up to everyone, and so let's just create this subgroup that defines diet. Because it's easy in broad strokes to say like vegetarian or whatever it is, or a label, but what does it look like if the goal is just good nutrition?
I suppose I mean to ask whether you think shareholders are concerned about their investment.
I got a physical, and I posted the results. I posted the results, just the pieces of paper, on the Slack. I mean, it was nothing. I could post them publicly too. There's nothing that exciting in there. I think there's something that was a little high. Do you remember what it was?
Your cholesterol.
Yeah, it was a little high. And so, yeah, I think I think sharing that stuff. When I got my DNA tested, that was something where I was like, I want to share this with the shareholders, and they make it so hard because they're so paranoid about keeping all that stuff private. And I'm like, I just want to switch where I can just publicly share all that stuff. And I think that's probably rare. So yeah, I think health.
You don't have the balding gene, we know that.
Yeah.
And you're great at coffee.
I got nervous about the balding gene. I sent Marika this picture when I was at the accelerator. Someone had taken a photo behind me, and I was like, oh no, it looks like maybe. And so I was like, have you noticed this? And then I think you
Logged into your account for you.
yeah,
Check out.
and checked. So we checked the gene, and then checked with the person who cuts my hair. And so
Very funny.
I'm okay there. And she was like, no, I haven't noticed. And I was like, yes. So that's good.
Opposite ends of the scientific spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. Cover both ends. Like, yep. Yeah. So.
Just various thoughts as the investment ages.
Yeah. Well, and there's potentially an end, right? I mean, not to get too dark, but I'm not going to live forever.
What happens when you die? No shares.
Well, right now, that's there is an insurance policy that if I die, my brother Kurt is the executor, and he'll get in touch with Aaron, who will shut the website down, so there'll be no more trading. And then basically everyone gets to divide that pool of money based on how many shares they own, but only up to the value of the shares. So it's impossible to make money if I die, but you might get only up to your investment. You might get less if there's so many out there. So, but you'll get a proportionate amount of that. So, yeah. So there's that. Something. Yeah, if you can get a better price. Yeah. I mean, you might just automatically get cashed out. Yeah. But, but like if I got like a terminal illness or whatever, then maybe that gets made into like a Lifetime movie, and maybe the share price goes up. I don't know. And why? I mean, the share price could keep going after I die too. I don't know. Like, why not? If the intellectual property of KmikeyM continues on, then maybe there's value there. Maybe we incorporate it for real and go that route. So I think there's options.
It seems like incorporating for real would potentially have legal ramifications.
Well, yeah.
You've been able to hide under the guise of art, essentially.
I wouldn't say hide or guise. I mean, this is very clearly an art project and is in no way a company. And no one actually thinks they own a share of a company, right? Everyone knows that we're just playing a game together. I define myself as high risk, and I think even in the about it says like, I have the right to run off to Aruba with all your money. So you should only invest in me if you really trust me. But yeah, I don't know. There's something like, if one of these projects actually spinned out into a successful company of some sort, it would be amazing to have some sort of shareholder representation in that. I think that's important.
Yeah, a question about share value. Was the PR moment around the announcement of the film, did that represent a big or the biggest spike in?
No, the
price?
biggest spike by far was being on the Today Show. Which was amazing because I was like, who watches morning television? And it turns out everyone. Yeah, so that's when it went up to like $20 a share, which is the price my dad bought at. So thanks, Dad.
Any other plans for similar, if that sort of is understood that a big PR moment leads to an increase in share, I think shareholders would be interested in maybe other plans that you have to reach that kind of audience again? Or
PR stunts.
Absolutely. It's very like, it's just kind of supply and demand. When a huge influx of people want to come in and buy shares, then you all get the opportunity to start selling them shares at higher and higher prices, which is great. And they don't necessarily look at the history to know that we started at $1 a share. So they think 20 is fine. Again, thanks, Dad. But yeah, so I think always thinking about ways of bringing people in, whether that's kind of a consistent, slow marketing effort or a PR stunt. I think I definitely don't hide from the media, as is apparent today. So yeah, I'm happy to participate in various projects of mine or other people's. And I have been, since a large part of what happened there was based on the Romance Project. And so I think in thinking about that, I'm like, that was a really good story. And these are the ways in which it was a good story. And how do I replicate that, in other parts of my life, or even in telling other people like, oh, to get media attention, do something that seems kind of dumb, right? Because the media likes that. They like when there's like a split issue of like, some people are going to be, that's brilliant, or that's horrible, you're bringing back slavery, or whatever it is, whatever your like concept is, which is what I've been accused of with KmikeyM. So yeah, I think thinking about PR, and I don't know about stunts. I'm not opposed to stunts. I wouldn't want to do a stunt only to get attention, but I would do a stunt because I was conceptually interested in it, and then it also got attention. Yeah.
So you didn't actually, on your slides, talk about the number of shareholders in your company. Did I miss that? How many shareholders are there?
It's
You answered the question earlier, but give us the basic statistics.
Yeah, so there's just over 3,000 user accounts, and the number of shareholders, I want to say, is hovering right around 500. I think it's just shy of that, and it changes a little bit based on who's holding shares and who's not. Pulling that information out of the system is actually a little bit hard. We didn't design it to easily tell how many. It's like I can see how many users there are, but I can't see how many of them own shares. So sometimes I ask Aaron to run some queries and tell me how many actual shareholders there are. But yeah, the last time we checked, which was not that long ago, it was like right around that 500 mark. Yeah, and that's something, I could display that a lot easier. I think that in trading volume, that's the interesting thing that wasn't represented on the stock price is that when I started doing the regular updates every 2 weeks with the votes, trading volume definitely increased, even if the price stayed about the same. So a lot more people were buying and selling because they were reminded to come back. So that was really exciting. And then I should have put on the highlights Aaron's work in the way that the new system of buying and selling shares work. Used to be you could go in and choose arbitrarily to buy from this person or that person at whatever price, and now you always buy at the best possible price, and it just makes the whole system way easier because it more replicates the model of a TD Ameritrade account or something. So, yeah.
I should know the answer to this, but when one buys shares, are you definitely buying from someone else, or are you buying from available shares to be sold?
You're buying from the other shareholders, yeah. So once a year, I'll release new shares. There was not enough demand when we started to do an IPO, so they kind of trickled out. And initially, I was intermixed within all the shareholders, but then it was decided that I was able to undercut the market too much because I'm holding a massive amount of shares. There's a total of 100,000 shares, about 10,000 of which are currently traded. And so it was decided that I would just do kind of a regular release of shares. And I didn't do in this past year, but I have an idea, and I've done it a little bit differently each time, various different kinds of auctions. I think for this next one, what I want to do is sell options. And so basically say, you have the right to buy at a discounted price in the future, but you have to pay me for that right now. And then you're making the bet of like, well, if I'm to say you can buy 100 shares in the future at $3 a share, but you have to pay me $50 right now. And you have to kind of do the math of like, how does that work out for me? Is it going to be higher? I'll make a lot. If not, yeah. But it's an option, so you don't have to exercise it as well. So that's my current thinking. I'll probably put that up for vote soon. I haven't done options. I like the idea of getting into some more. Yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun. We talked about adding shorting, so you could loan your shares to someone and then they could sell and have to buy back, which I thought would be a good counter to people that really hate the project, because I could be like, fine, just short the stock, and if I do terrible, if you think this whole thing is going to crash, then you'll win. So, but that's complicated.
Are most of your shareholders in the Portland metro area, do you think? Or can you locate that, or are they all over?
They're all over. They're definitely all over, yeah. It started that way. Initially, everyone was someone I knew, and then it kind of grew like maybe one degree away, a couple strangers. And again, there was this kind of, I call it the holy trifecta of media when I was in the Atlantic Monthly, Wired, and the Today Show, and that kind of exploded it. So on the website, you can see a list of the top 10 shareholders, and they own about 47% of the shares. It's funny I've watched that number kind of dwindle from 51 down to 47. But I know all of them, but I haven't even met all of them. So even the major shareholders I've never met in person.
Do you think if you had more shareholders in the Portland area, it would get you further with some of the progress or the projects you've been doing or working on?
That's interesting. I haven't thought about geography, except that in things like this, I tend to hang out with the Portland shareholders. And even mentally, when I'm kind of like, when I think about the faces of the shareholders, I tend to think about the people that I know, either locally or that I used to hang out with and now live in Los Angeles. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't. I guess because I interact mostly with people in Portland, I think I'm talking to more people about it here. I want to do more things like this and bring them together, because I think I don't have very many opportunities to really poll the shareholders very often, or if I do, it's a very impersonal, like, hey, go on this weird form, and everyone's like, I'm at work, I don't want to do your dumb form, like it's enough that you vote. So I think getting together and giving people alcohol or forcing them to be in a documentary as a gift is one way to get people to show up and give feedback. I don't think I really answered that question. But.
What can we do to help you as shareholders?
Man, that's a great, recruit more shareholders, buy shares. Never buy or sell lower than the current price. That's terrible, because then the price goes down, and that makes me sad. So I'm just kidding, that's fine. It should fluctuate. Yeah, I think if you have ideas about things that could be votes, or if you have ideas about ways in which sort of a group decision-making engine might be useful elsewhere, just even if you don't want to like get into it, shoot me an email or a text or something and be like, or come get coffee or whatever, because it's an idea I want to explore about how this thing gets used elsewhere. Been talking to people about what sort of a generic version of KmikeyM might look like that other people could use for group decision-making, and looking at like what are the current tools out there for that, and they're all pretty bad. Could something like that be actually, an actual like viable product or something? So, yeah.
I'll interject a shameless. If anybody knows agents or editors
Oh, yeah.
who are in the publication industry and might be interested in the story or the book idea, that I think could be an interesting accelerator of interest in the project.
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time kind of publicly announcing that we're working on that. And we have a book proposal together, and Thomas has been sending it out to various people. So that's an exciting project. I'm really bad with names, so maybe if I saw her face, I'd be like, oh yeah. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. That's a great question. I'm gonna let Thomas answer that question.
It's called Publicly Traded: Living a Life Worthy of Investment. So the original platform was presenting Mike's story as almost a self-help or an actualization tool to say, how can I use the tools of being publicly traded to be more efficient or productive or successful or compelling. We have learned and feel that it's going to be, it needs a narrative pull that's much more based around moments from his life, anecdotes, things that draw you into the actual story arc, and then bring through, rather than just being, I'm Mike Merrill, therefore these are 10 rules that you should live by. But it's in the, almost in the sort of blink, or this kind of, what part of putting together a book proposal, you imagine where it belongs on the shelves, and it belongs in these sort of financial advice, how to be productive. One of the things that we thought of, you should be able to read it on a one-way flight from New York to LA. Like it, cruise through it really fast, high level, few takeaways.
And a lot of amusing anecdotes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when we started that project, I was reading 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is actually a great book. Like, I feel like it gets made fun of more than it gets talked about. But there's there's almost like, I think what I didn't like about that book was that the stories in it I thought were not very good. And so I would kind of skip past them. And so when we first talked about it, I was like, trim the fat, just get to the parts that matter. But turns out story matters. So. All right.
Just a small request.
Yep.
Could I ask you to re-ask your question about what happens when you die?
Yeah. Anytime.
Whenever you.
I have a question.
Yes, Robbie.
What happens when you die with our shares?
That's a great question. There is an insurance policy, which you may know of. That was a shareholder question where I signed it over. And so when I die, my insurance policy goes to my younger brother, who will essentially, trading will stop. No one will be able to trade shares, and you will get a payout up to the value of your shares, depending on how much is left over. So you might only get a percentage of that money if there's not enough to fill everybody, to set everybody right. All right. It's always weird to repeat. Yeah, and thanks to anyone who's watching on Facebook. Oh, did I? Yeah, there's a bright light, yeah. That's next year's presentation, yeah, a cliffhanger, yeah. Thanks, everybody, I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
It's nice to have you all in person. And thank you for making me, yeah.